Hi, this is David Williams. I'm here with Tripp Johnson. Good morning, Tripp.
Good morning, David. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for joining me today. What I want to start out with, like I start most of these interviews, is just a brief introduction because I know that you've got a lot of things that you can share with us, and I'm going to open up the opportunity for you to go through some things in just a moment. Then at the very end, you can share your website URLs and things of that nature. So very briefly, who you are and what you do, and then I will spark it with some of the things that I've learned about you to kind of help you just dive in and have a conversation with me.
Great. So I'm Tripp Johnson. I'm the CEO of Green Hill Recovery, which is a substance abuse and mental health treatment program for young adults in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Well, I appreciate that brief because I'm about to let you dive in because I know you've got a lot that you can share because you've got the recovery website and being involved in that, which obviously you're going to be able to talk about replacing bad habits with good habits as you talk with me today. You've got your own personal blog, which you talk about leadership on there. And then I learned just before starting the record that you were a nationally ranked tennis player at the age of 16. You went on to go to West Point. So what I'm going to do is just let you talk with me for a few minutes and kind of walk me through some of that stuff. And along the way, obviously, you can share your own story and own learning experiences, but any tips that come to mind, I'm going to be doing like I do on most of these videos, jotting down some notes because it helps me come up with how am I going to title this, because I don't want to just say Tripp Johnson and I have a conversation. So
Great.
with that, Tripp, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you just dive in.
Sure. So I'll try and be as succinct as possible with some of the background, but I'm known to be a little verbose. So I grew up in Hickory, North Carolina, ended up getting really into tennis around age 10 and really played through college. I was on the tennis team at West Point. And when I was 16, I thought I was going to be a professional athlete. Ended up, my own journey was getting a little bit sidetracked. I put off my social life when I was younger and got really started having fun, partying a little bit too much, probably around 16, and was able to keep it together, went to West Point, graduated from there, commissioned as an infantry officer, went to Ranger School. And then right after Ranger School, I went to my unit. I took over a platoon and I deployed to Southern Afghanistan near Kandahar for 9 months, which, I'm very thankful for all of the opportunities I had at West Point and in the Army. But it was really like the next chapter of my life kind of started when I got back from that deployment. And even though, on paper, I was doing a lot of things really well, there was kind of a lingering feeling that I wasn't living up to my potential or that something was missing. And it was something, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I just didn't feel like I was any closer to being the kind of person, the kind of man that I wanted to be. And I didn't feel like, the last 8 or 9 years had moved me any closer to that. So that kind of kicked off a very deliberate process of personal development. And that started for me with I was fortunate. I called my dad. I said, Dad, I know this is going to sound crazy. I'm a 210-pound Army Ranger. All I've done is talk about eating red meat and shooting guns. But tell me a little bit about this yoga thing you do. And he said, okay, that is crazy. And I'm going to tell you, I think you're really going to like it. So he encouraged me to just give it a try. He said, there's a type of yoga, Ashtanga yoga, which is a pretty disciplined practice I do in the morning. And he said, why don't you give this a try, do it for 30 days and start meditating. And that was some pretty outside of the box advice, but I had seen my dad get into, yoga and meditation later in life, really when he retired. And I saw how much happier he got and just kind of more at ease with the world. So I said, all right, sign me up. I'll give it a try. And now it's 6 years later. I've had a daily yoga practice and a daily meditation practice. And that really was kind of the beginning of an unfolding of a new kind of lifestyle for me.
So talk about, as far as a new lifestyle, you would think, I look at, you've got a story trying to the words come together for me. You've got a story that is, obviously everybody has a unique story, but yours is even beyond the, what I would say, the average high school student, you know, the average person out there, because of being nationally ranked as a tennis player at 16, then going to West Point and becoming an Army Ranger, right? Because when you said Ranger School, obviously that's kind of the elite part of the Army. But then what I find interesting is when you get out and on the other side of it, you start thinking and doing some soul searching, and you ask your dad, which I'm sure was probably a little bit of a shock to him to think, okay, you know, my son did this and this and this, because on the outside, like what you said, you would think that, hey, this guy's got some cool stuff going on, right? You know, West Point grad and good at tennis, that type of stuff. But obviously you wanted to get to the next level, and it sounds like yoga and meditation was a good en route for that. Talk about personal development for a moment, because obviously with the discipline of playing tennis, the discipline of West Point and the Army Ranger stuff, and then yoga, you said, is 6 years later now. Obviously you have to have some habits that you've created since early on in your life. Talk about what it's like to create those habits, because I'm sure one of the things that you guys do at the Recovery Center, from what I know about the recovery side, is obviously you're trying to replace, you know, something that's not good in somebody's life with something that's a better habit. So talk to me for a moment about personal development and what that looks like for you, and even some of the things you've seen from other people that you think, well, this person did this, but then they were able to switch to this.
Yeah, so I've actually spent a lot of time learning how to learn, I would say, is something. When I think of personal development, you know, I often break it down into, you know, the kind of cultivation of new skills, and then just, you know, this movement towards, I break down personal development and then what I would call self-realization into two different tracks that you can that are best pursued simultaneously. So when I think about personal development, that's a lot about the habits we're trying to form. And when it comes to that, you know, one of the tools that I've come across, I have always had, let me back up and say, I have always been very, you know, disciplined on the outside. It's been, I would say that I'm a little bit obsessive as a personality type, and I get really carried away with things. So when I was younger, it was tennis, you know, then for a while it was being kind of the class clown and the wild child. That kind of turned into the Army Ranger mentality, and I was able to embrace this kind of work hard, play hard. And then when I got into yoga and meditation, you know, that was another kind of identity that I dove right into. And then more recently, I'm kind of working on integrating all of these different identities into this whole person. So when I think of, you know, what do we really want? And at the bottom of it, this is something I'll never forget, was in 5th grade, sitting and watching a talent show, I started wondering, you know, what do I want out of life? And I kind of came up with the, you know, somewhat profound realization that what we all wanted was just to be happy, to have that kind of contentment. But just looking for that doesn't make it any easier to find it. It can be very elusive. So, you know, really getting into, you know, personal development as just a process that we're always going to be undertaking. And the more we can just view it as a process, the better. So when I think about like the habits that I'm either maintaining or trying to instill, I use the self planner. I think it's called Best Self Company. And that way it keeps me on track from kind of my quarterly goals down to my weekly list of what I want to do, what I really want to focus on. And then each day has, you know, a layout for the day. It's got my schedule, my top 3 goals, the habits that I'm trying to work on instilling, and then a gratitude practice in the morning and evening. So making sure to kind of reflect in the morning and say what I'm grateful for, and then looking back at the end of the day and capturing what I've been grateful for throughout the day has been a really powerful tool. And again, with that journal, what it has on the weekly checklist is it gives you a space for, you know, 7 or 8 habits that you're trying to cultivate, and you just check off whether you did them or not. So that's been a really powerful tool for me.
You shared some stuff, and it's amazing. Like, no one person has had the same story, obviously, of the few that I've done. I'm in double digits on these now, but still within that first 12 to 15 or so. And it's amazing to me that the crossover that we have, like the gratitude and starting your day being thankful and looking at things to be thankful for. I like the way that you brought it to an end, like at the end of your day, of reassessing, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
was I truly grateful today? Did I accomplish the goals that I set? Did I do those things? To me, it sounds like whether we're in a good economy, a bad economy, whether you're having a good day or a bad day, obviously it's important to kind of stick through those habits and that discipline, no matter what's happening around you. Is that correct? And have you done a pretty good job, you feel like, over the last, it sounds like you're getting better at this, but say over the last year or two, as you've really continued to focus on this, no matter what your surroundings, have you been able to keep yourself focused? If not, then I'd love to hear how you got refocused. But for the most part, have you stayed on track with what you just shared with us?
I would say largely that I stay on track, and I probably spend too much time thinking about whether I'm on track or off track instead of just enjoying, kind of the present moment. I would say that there's always some metacognition going about, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing at this moment? And I would say that's one of the things the journaling has really helped, because instead of just staying on track, it's good to look down and see, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't need to be worrying about whatever came up in my email, anything else. But I had found the practice that I've added more recently, and again, I've taken a very deliberate path on this kind of personal improvement. I read an average of a book or book and a half a week. And last year, my reading consists largely of leadership, personal development, stuff like David Allen's Getting Things Done, and then kind of that spiritual or contemplative development side of things. So, the thing that I've added recently that I was supposed to add when I implemented the Getting Things Done system, but it was a really systematic weekly review. So those daily snapshots in the morning and in the evening, where I take the time to organize my day and just really capture in writing what I'm going to do, and then reflect back on what I'm grateful for at the end of the day and what lessons I've learned, has been incredibly useful. And kind of taking it to the next level is I spend about 2-3 hours on a Sunday really writing in a narrative, what went well from the week, what I'm proud of, what was the most frustrating, and just taking really an inventory of what's going on. And that process has been really helpful.
You've spent a little more time probably than some of my guests, talking about the personal development side, which is part of what Hope Now 2020 is about. It's about small business and personal development, because obviously you can't be successful whether you work for somebody else, you're a leader in a small business, you're a leader in a company, you run a small business, without having yourself, everything in order, right? You have to be developed personally. You have to do some things to improve yourself. And I love some of the things that you shared. And I know from my own experience, I've tried the journaling thing, and I don't mean that in a bad thing, because I think it's good that you have the discipline. I have not been able to get my self on track with journaling. And so I say that because I think it's a great habit. I can see how that would work. And we all have things that we know, like, if I could just make myself journal, or I could just do this, that type of thing. And so I'm with you on a lot of what you're saying. So I'm listening, and I'm hoping that anyone watching the video or listening to the audio are picking up on some things that they can implement in their life. Because as I hear you talk about in the morning, in the evening, and then a weekly assessment, to me, that's some great advice on developing yourself personally. I know a lot of people that are into fitness, they don't let things hold them back. If they're really sick or something, things come up, but for the most part, they have a routine. The first person that I spoke with today was at 9 o'clock in the morning. And one of the first things he said was, I've already got my workout in. So people have that discipline to do those things. So I think it's great that you've shared a lot about the personal development side, because obviously with your background, you've had to implement personal development skills. So what I want to do now is give you an opportunity, before we get to the closing part where you share your website and things of that nature, just kind of closing thoughts that you may have. Like, what advice, somebody like myself that has tried journaling more than once in my life, and maybe I need to be doing something besides journaling, maybe there's another answer, but what advice do you give to people out there that know they need to do certain things and just kind of trying to make it happen and create those habits? Just kind of bring us home with some final thoughts that will help. You've already said some things I know I need to do, so that will help anyone listening to this out. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that before we close.
Sure. I think it's really important to start small. You know, we don't need to, I am a failed journaler for 4 or 5 years before the practice stuck. And I found a journal that has prompts. So I'm actually just filling things out. I'm not sitting down with a blank sheet of paper every day. So that's been really helpful for me on the journaling front. And then I would say, you know, I think developing a meditation practice as a leader is one of the most important things you can do. There are a lot of great apps out there. The one that I'm the most fond of is called the Waking Up app by Sam Harris, but there's also Calm and Headspace. All of these have kind of a platform to help you, you know, start small with like 10 minutes a day, kind of work yourself up. And provide a nice kind of framework for that, because I think, you know, when we're trying too hard to get better, we might try and implement everything all at once and then feel like we crash and burn. So I think just that old tortoise and the hare kind of parable, just thinking what small change can I make, and let's stick with it for a week or two before trying to add anything else.
That is absolutely fantastic. Obviously, you would think, oh, it's just so obvious that I should start small, that I should do these things. And you said something, because I think every time that I've tried journaling, I've started with a blank page. I don't know that I've started with prompts. So, and journaling may not work for everybody. There may be other things, you know, there's apps to do things. There's so many things out there, so many resources. But I think the biggest takeaway is obviously starting small and baby steps, getting, you know, and the tortoise and the hare was a great example, because the tortoise seems so slow, and I've crashed and burned numerous times when I've tried to do things. So I get your analogy there. And so what I want to encourage people to do is just, like Tripp said, start small, start creating those daily habits, try something new, and see if you can make a difference. So with that, Tripp, what I want to do is give you an opportunity. I know that leads me, first of all, to your personal blog, because you say that you talk about leadership and things of that nature on there. My assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, is you may cover some of the same type of stuff that you talked about today with personal development. So tell the audience first about the blog, what the URL is and kind of what the topics are you talk about, and then we'll come back to the recovery in just a moment.
Sure. So my personal blog is trippj.com. That's TRIPP.com. Oh, TRIPPJ.com, trippj.com. The blog, the kind of title of that blog is Examining Leadership, Life, and the Contemplative Path. So what I'm really dedicated that time to are my reflections on, you know, running a small business, my leadership lessons that I've learned through hard work and a lot of failure, and, you know, how to build kind of an integrated life. So I think a lot about how are we building that integrated life where our work is supporting our play and vice versa. So you'll find my weekly reflections on there, and then you'll also see that as much as I read, I like to review books and talk about how they've had an impact on myself and then my organization as well.
That sounds like an awesome blog to check out. So it's Tripp, TRIPPJ, as in Johnson, right? .com.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'll try to link in the video description as well as in the podcast description, have the link to that blog. Go ahead and mention the recovery site. And while you're mentioning the recovery site, anything else that you want to share about how to, follow you on social media, connect with you on LinkedIn, what platforms you're out there besides your blog, so the recovery site as well as any social media, so people know how to reach you, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. So our organization's website is greenhillrecovery.com. And you'll find a lot of information that's great about kind of our program at Green Hill, our phenomenal team that we have, and just some, general tips for if you are navigating any sort of substance misuse or someone in your family. And then as far as finding me on social media or around the web, I'm on LinkedIn at Tripp Johnson. And then on Twitter, I'll have to get back to you on that one. I can't remember what my Twitter handle is right now, but you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. If you search Tripp Johnson, 2 P's, it'll be pretty easy to find me.
Awesome. Well, Tripp, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. I appreciate all the information that you shared. I encourage people to start small and build those daily habits. Check out your blog, because it sounds like you cover a lot of the things that we talked about today. Again, thank you so much, Tripp, for joining me. Have a fantastic day.
Great. Thanks a lot, David.